Frost crept across the wine glasses before anyone in the room understood why. It bloomed along the stems first, thin as breath on a window, and then climbed the crystal in slow white feathers, while Delphine Hollis was still in the middle of her sentence, still smiling the smile she used when she wanted an insult mistaken for concern. She did not notice. Nobody noticed, not yet, because everyone was watching Kieran Ashgrave instead, and Kieran Ashgrave was not looking at the frost. He was looking at Delphine, and his eyes, which had been the color of rain-worn slate all evening, had gone the deep, wet red of garnet held up to a candle. Wren Calloway felt the temperature drop before she understood what was happening to the room. She felt it the way you feel a storm arrive 2 rooms away. A pressure change behind the sternum, gooseflesh up both arms, though the windows were shut. She had spent 3 months learning the particular stillness that came over Kieran when he was holding something back, and she had never once seen it look like this, coiled and cold and enormous, filling the parlor the way water fills a cracked hull. He did not raise his voice. That was the part she would remember longest afterward, lying awake turning the whole evening over like sea glass in her palm. He did not raise his voice at all. If anyone in this room needs reminding what Wren is worth, he said, quiet enough that people had to lean in to hear it, and somehow that made it land harder than shouting would have. That says a great deal more about them than it does about her. Then, as quickly as it had come, it was gone. The red drained back to gray. The frost on the glassware softened, blurred, and by the time Grant Hollis blinked and looked down at his own wine, he would have sworn the chill he'd felt was only a draft from the hall. Kieran stepped back half a pace, folded his hands behind him the way Wren had learned he did when he wanted his body to look smaller than it was, and let the room's attention drift back to where it belonged, away from him, toward the woman in the second-hand navy dress who had not asked anyone in that house to defend her. Nobody clapped. Nobody should have. But 3 months earlier, on a wet Tuesday night with the mist off the harbor turning to a fine cold rain against the windows, Wren Calloway had not known that a man like that existed, let alone that he would one day stand in her sister's parlor, with frost following his temper, across a table of good crystal. 3 months earlier, she had known only the thump of a crooked dryer, and the smell of detergent, and the particular loneliness of midnight when the whole town of Hollow Bay was asleep, except for the people who had nowhere else to be. The dryer on the end had a limp. Wren could hear it from the folding table, an uneven, thumping rhythm, like something with one bad leg trying to keep pace with the others. She did not bother checking it anymore. Sheets from the Anchorage Inn, 6 loads of them, needed folding before the 7 o'clock morning pickup, and the machine would either finish the job or it would not. Outside, the harbor mist had turned to rain, tapping the front windows of the lantern wash in no particular rhythm at all. The laundromat stayed open through the night for exactly this kind of weather. For fishermen who needed their gear dry before the next tide, for the bartender 2 streets over who washed his uniform shirts on his break, for whoever wandered in with nowhere else to be. Tonight, it was only Wren and the machines. She knew this room the way some people knew a kitchen. Dryer number 4 ran hot enough to shrink cotton if you weren't paying attention. The Anchorage Inn's manager always sent 9 bags and wrote 10 on the ticket. Old Mr. Perot, who came in most Thursdays around midnight, needed his quarters handed to him already counted into stacks of 4 because his hands shook too badly to count them himself, and he would rather nobody watched him try. The folding table had a short leg, and a wedge of cardboard beneath it kept the whole surface from rocking. She was checking a delivery slip for the Cormorant Hotel, 72 towels short by 2 according to her count, when her purse slid an inch across the counter and the envelope inside shifted into view. Cream-colored. Her sister Delphine's handwriting on the front, careful and round the way it had been since the 2 of them were girls. Wren didn't need to open it. She had read the reply card enough times to know it by heart. Wren Calloway and guest. The line after the word guest had gone soft and gray from her thumbnail, running over it again and again, as though she could rub an answer into existence if she tried hard enough. She tucked the envelope back down and reached into her apron pocket instead, where a piece of sea glass sat cool and smooth against her fingers, worn round by 20 years of tide before she had ever found it on Widow's Point Beach. She was not sure when touching it had become a habit. Somewhere between one hard week and the next, probably. The back door opened without a knock, and cold air came in ahead of a man she did not recognize. He was tall and pale in a way that made her first think illness, until she saw how easily he moved, how little the cold seemed to touch him even with the door standing open behind him. His hair was white, not gray, not silver, but a true startling white that made him look both younger and much older than the rest of his face suggested. He wore a canvas work jacket, dusted pale with sawdust, not the kind of coat that belonged in a laundromat at midnight, and he glanced around the room as if double-checking he had the right address. "I'm looking for whoever handles the Cormorant Hotel account," he said. "That's me," Wren said, not looking up from the towels. "You're a little late. Delivery went out 4 hours ago." "I know. That's the problem." He came closer, hands in his jacket pockets. "One of your drivers had a flat tire on Route 1. The order showed up short, and somebody at the front desk complained to my brother before the driver even made it back. I told him I'd come look into it myself. Your brother owns the hotel. He runs it." He said it like an apology, or maybe a warning. "I just fix boats." Wren held up the delivery slip. 72 towels went out in the van. "I counted them myself before Charlie left, and I counted the flat tire he had to change in the rain on the side of the road. If 2 towels are missing, they went missing somewhere between your back door and your front desk. Not from me." He looked at her a second too long, as though he hadn't expected to be handed a fact instead of an excuse. "Fair enough," he said. "I'll tell him that." She went back to folding. The far dryer thumped, uneven and stubborn, and she said, mostly to herself, "Every laundromat's got one machine that thinks it fought in a war." He almost smiled, caught himself doing it as though it surprised him. "I'm Kieran," he said. "Kieran Ashgrave." "Wren," she said, and did not offer her last name. He did not ask for it. He lingered near the folding table a moment, watching her check tags against her list, correcting a miscount before he mentioned he needed to make a call, and stepped into the narrow hallway by the change machine. She heard his voice, low, explaining the tire and the towels to someone on the other end, then quiet. She called her father a few minutes later, the way she did most nights around this hour, mostly to hear that he had taken his evening pills and had not tried to climb the porch steps too quickly. "Did you eat something besides crackers?" she asked him. "I had a sandwich." "Don't start." "I'm not starting. I'm asking." Samuel Calloway laughed, a little breathless the way he had gotten lately, and asked about Delphine's dinner, whether Wren had decided what she was wearing. It was an easy question. It should not have undone her. "I don't know if I'm going," she said, and heard her own voice go thin. "I don't want to walk in there alone again, watching everybody's face do that thing, where they're sorry for me and relieved it isn't them." She pressed her thumb hard against the sea glass in her pocket, and it slipped from her fingers and clicked against the tile beneath the counter. She bent quickly, too quickly, and closed her hand around it before it could roll under the folding table. When she straightened, Kieran was still in the hallway, but his eyes had moved once to her closed fist and away again, polite enough not to ask. "I wish someone would choose me," she said into the phone, so quietly she barely heard herself say it. "Just once. I wish somebody would walk into a room and be proud to stand next to me." She heard herself say it and wished, immediately, that the laundromat had better walls. In the hallway, Kieran had gone still with the phone against his ear. The call had already ended, though he had not hung up. He told himself later it was not listening, exactly. There was nowhere else to stand, and her voice carried the way voices carried in an empty room at midnight, but he did not leave, either. He thought of the invitation folded in his coat pocket, the one to his mother's dinner the following week, where he was expected to make easy conversation with Camille Voss, as though 2 people could be seated back into love simply because the table had an empty chair. When he came back out, Wren was folding again, dry-eyed, composed, as if the call had never happened. He did not mention it. He picked up the corrected delivery slip from the counter, thanked her, and told her someone should look at the dryer on the end before it caught fire. "It's fine," she said. "It just complains a lot." "Yeah," he said, glancing back once from the door. "I know the type." Then he was gone into the rain, and Wren stood alone again among the folded sheets, not knowing that the piece of herself he was carrying out into the dark was not the towel count at all. The breakfast counter at Dot's smelled of scorched coffee and bacon grease, and Samuel Calloway had already claimed his stool by the time Wren arrived, still in her work apron, her eyes not quite willing to focus without another hour of sleep behind them. "You look like you got run over," he said. "Good morning to you too." She set a paper cup in front of him. "Did you take the 7 o'clock pill or just the vitamin?" "I took the pill, Wren." He said her name the way he always did when he wanted her to back off an inch and not a mile. She let it go, mostly because he was already reaching for the sugar, and his hand was not shaking any worse than usual. He asked about the dinner, whether she'd settled on shoes, whether Delphine had called about the flowers. Ordinary questions. Wren gave him ordinary answers, and did not mention the phone call from the night before, or the fact that a stranger with white hair and cold hands might have heard every word of it. She was still turning that over an hour later, restocking detergent boxes, when the bell over the laundromat door rang, and it was him. Kieran in daylight this time, or what passed for daylight through the gray coastal cloud cover, jeans instead of the work jacket, holding something in both hands as though he was not sure he was allowed to be carrying it. "You're not delivering towels," she said. "No." He set a small glass jar on the counter between them. Sea glass, perhaps 24 pieces, blues and greens, one amber piece that caught what little light there was. "I saw the piece you dropped last night. Didn't mean to stare. I collect this along the shore near my workshop, and I thought yours might like some company. It sounded better when I practiced it in the truck." Wren looked at the jar, then at him. "Run low on sea glass to sell?" He winced slightly, hearing himself. It sounded less strange in my head. "Do you make a habit of showing up at people's jobs with presents, or is this a special occasion?" He did not answer right away, and that pause told her more than anything he might have said. He looked at the folding table, at the quiet dryer, anywhere but at her. "I heard you on the phone last night," he said finally. "I wasn't trying to. I was in the hallway, and I didn't leave when I should have." Wren felt her face go hot. "Which part? The part about wishing someone would choose you?" He said it plainly, without softening it, and somehow that was worse than if he had tiptoed around it. "I'm not bringing you a jar of glass to fix that. I don't know how you'd fix something like that. I just didn't want to pretend I hadn't heard it." "That felt worse than saying nothing," she said, arms crossed. Behind her, an elderly woman feeding quarters into the change machine was pretending very hard not to listen. "Most people who overhear something private have the decency to keep pretending," Wren said. "I'm bad at pretending. Ask my family." A small, crooked, almost smile. "It's caused problems." She did not smile back, but something in her shoulders loosened half an inch. "You always tell people exactly what you overheard?" "Only when the alternative is worse." Wren looked down at the jar again. The pieces inside were mismatched, some rounder than others, one still sharp-edged along one side as if it had not finished its work yet. She thought of the single piece already sitting on her windowsill at home, the one from Widow's Point Beach she had carried in her pocket for years without ever explaining to anyone why. "I have a family dinner coming up," Kieran said before she could ask him to leave. "My mother's affair. I'm not looking forward to it." He shrugged as though the sentence had cost him something to finish. "Your sister's dinner is the same week, I'm guessing, since you mentioned it." "You guessing, or you already knew that?" "Guessing. I'm not that good at eavesdropping." He held up both hands. "I'm not asking you to go with me. I'm not asking for anything. If you ever wanted company that didn't want something back, I'd be glad to be that. That's all." No conditions attached, no mention of what he'd get out of it, no hint that he expected gratitude. Wren had spent enough years around men who treated a favor as a down payment to recognize when someone was not doing that, and it unsettled her more than if he had. "I'll think about it," she said, which was as much as she was willing to give him standing in the middle of her job with a coworker 3 feet away, pretending to check the lost and found box. "Fair enough." He nodded, once, as though the answer satisfied him more than it should have, and left the jar on the counter when he went. Wren did not thank him aloud. She carried the jar to the back room instead and set it on the shelf above the time clock, beside her purse, beside the cream-colored envelope she still had not opened. That night, after her shift, she brought it home and set it on the windowsill next to the piece she already had. 2 now, instead of 1. She stood there a moment in the dark kitchen, her father's television murmuring from the next room, trying to decide whether she had just met someone unusually decent or someone whose true nature she simply had not found yet. She said yes on a Tuesday, in the middle of counting quarters, without any of the ceremony she had imagined giving it. Kieran had come by to drop off a corrected invoice, an excuse they both understood, since the invoice had been correct for a week already. Wren looked up from the register and said, "Fine, I'll come to your dinner. You can come to my sister's." Then, before he could make it into something bigger than it was, "It's not a date. I want that understood. It's 2 people not wanting to walk into a room by themselves." "Understood," Kieran said, and did not smile too widely about it, which was exactly the right amount of not smiling. He offered a few days later to have someone from a shop send over a selection of dresses for her to consider. He said it the way people say things they haven't thought through, already reaching for his phone. "No," Wren said, fast enough that he stopped mid-reach. "It's not a big deal. It's a big deal to me." She folded her arms. "I have a navy dress from the consignment shop on 4th Street. I've worn it twice. It still fits. That's what I'm wearing." Kieran nodded, though she could tell by the set of his jaw that he wanted to argue the point, so she gave him something else to think about instead. Is your mother's house cold? Rich houses are always cold, like they're air-conditioned for penguins. That got the almost smile out of him again. It runs cold, yes. My mother likes it that way. Says warm rooms make people lazy. Bring a sweater then. I'm not freezing for anybody's dinner party. The subject of money came up again a few days after that, smaller this time. He mentioned, in passing, that he could easily cover having the dress properly hemmed, that it was nothing really barely worth mentioning. Nothing to you, Wren said, not unkindly, but flat. When you say a couple $100 is nothing, you know what I hear? I hear that my math doesn't matter. That's not a knock on you. It's not nothing to me. I hem my own dresses. Kieran went quiet a moment, turning that over. I didn't think of it that way. Most people who say it don't. I'm sorry, he said plainly, without asking her to tell him it was fine, and that, more than the apology itself, was what stuck with her. She proved the point that Saturday, sitting on her own front porch step with a needle and thread, taking up the hem herself while Kieran waited nearby, oddly out of his depth. He had brought a bag of oranges from the farm stand, which nobody had asked for, and peeled one slowly while she worked, offering pieces without comment. You're better with a boat hull than a sewing needle, she said, glancing at him. I've never once tried to sew anything, she could tell. In between stitches, she took a call from the fuel company about a payment plan for the house, kept her voice even and businesslike through the whole thing, negotiated the due date back a week, and hung up as though she had just discussed the weather. Kieran did not ask about it. She noticed that he did not ask, and noticed herself noticing. His workshop, when she stopped by the following week to pick up a gray cardigan for a woman near the marina, smelled of cedar and linseed oil, and stayed dim even at midday, the shutters drawn against a sun he never seemed to work beneath. Kieran had not bought a new sweater. He had simply carried an old one with a missing button to somebody who knew how to make things last. He was sanding the hull of an old sailboat, the same 6 inches of wood over and over, patient in a way that did not match the flustered man who had shown up with a jar of sea glass. You do that a lot, she said. The same spot. Wood tells you when it's ready. Rush it and it splits later, somewhere you can't see. That sounds like patience wearing a man's clothes. It's the only kind I've got, he said, and did not look up. His phone buzzed on the workbench. He glanced at the screen. Camille, it read, and he let it ring out 4 times, 5 before turning it face down without a word. Wren watched him do it, and did not ask who Camille was, not yet. Some things you let a person hand you when they are ready, not when you are curious. They fell, without deciding to, into a habit of saying things to each other that they might not have said out loud otherwise. Kieran admitting the dinner made his stomach hurt a little, though he could never quite explain why food never seemed to interest him the way it interested other men. Wren admitting she had not told Delphine yet that she was bringing anyone. Somewhere in the 3rd week, sitting on his workshop steps with the sea glass in her pocket and sawdust on the hem of her jeans, she said, half joking, we should have a rule. Say the true thing. No polishing it up first. Say the true thing, Kieran repeated as though trying it on. I can work with that. It became a kind of shorthand between them, a thing one of them said, when the other started smoothing an answer too carefully. A small checkpoint neither of them made a production of. That night, Wren sat on the edge of her bed and took both pieces of sea glass from the drawer, turning them over in her palm, the old one from Widow's Point and the newer one from Kieran's jar. She did not know yet what either dinner would cost her, but she knew, holding them, that whatever happened in those rooms would only mean something if she managed not to leave herself standing outside the door. Ashgrave Hall sat above the harbor cliffs like it had grown there, without ever trying to prove anything, its windows lit gold against an early dark that seemed to arrive faster up on the bluff than it did down in town. Wren stood at the base of the stone steps a moment too long, smoothing the navy dress with both hands. You can still back out, Kieran said, not unkindly. I hemmed this dress myself. I'm wearing it into that house. She started up the steps before he could offer his arm. Inside, the room smelled of wood smoke and something roasting, though Wren would notice only much later that none of the family seemed to be eating very much of it. Voices, ice in glasses, a string quartet playing low from someone's phone. A woman at the coat closet asked what Wren did, in the particular tone that meant the answer would determine how long she kept listening. Wren said she worked nights at a laundromat and watched the woman's smile hold perfectly still, a second too long before moving on. Kieran's mother found them near the dining room. Lady Seraphine Ashgrave was warm in the way that took decades of practice, her hand light on Wren's arm, her pale eyes doing a fast, thorough inventory, the kind that missed nothing and forgave less. "Kieran didn't tell us much about you," she said, which Wren understood immediately as a complaint dressed as a compliment. "I didn't have much to tell yet," Kieran said, before Wren had to answer for herself. His brother Julian arrived shortly after, tall like Kieran but sharper somehow, with color in his face that Kieran's never quite held, already checking his watch though the meal had not started. He shook Wren's hand with exactly the pressure of a man greeting someone he intended to forget. "Julian runs the hotel," Kieran said. "I just fix what floats." "Someone has to," Julian said, and it was not quite a joke. Camille arrived last, and the room shifted around her the way rooms do for people used to being noticed. She was lovely and easy, and clearly fond of Kieran in a way that had nothing hesitant in it. She kissed his cheek as though it cost her nothing, said it had been too long, and Wren watched Kieran's jaw go tight and still. At the table, Lady Seraphine arranged the seating with the casual authority of a woman who had been doing it for longer than anyone in the room wanted to guess, and somehow Camille ended up beside Kieran. For old time's sake, Seraphine said lightly, already moving on to the next name card. Kieran's hand closed around his water glass, and Wren, 2 seats down, caught his eye and said, quiet enough that it passed for nothing at all, "Say the true thing." He exhaled once, and when the next lull came, he simply asked Julian to trade seats with him. No scene, no explanation, just done. Later, in the narrow hallway near the kitchen where Wren had gone looking for water, Kieran found her and, without much preamble, told her the rest. Camille had ended things 2 weeks before their wedding, he said, once she understood exactly what marrying into the Ashgrave line would and would not give her. She had come back around the time his father passed, when the old family trust came up for renewal, and his share of it became, as Kieran put it, worth someone's attention again. He said it evenly, like a fact he had made peace with a long time ago. But Wren heard the old humiliation sitting just beneath the words. "That's a hard thing to make peace with," she said. "You get good at it, or you get quiet about it." Same result from the outside. Back at the table, a guest mistook Wren for one of the catering staff, asking her to clear a dropped fork before she could correct him. She picked it up, handed it back, and said plainly that she was not on staff. She was there with Kieran. No apology in it. The guest reddened and moved on. Kieran, catching the exchange from across the room, said her name properly to the next 3 people who asked, mentioned her father by name, mentioned the laundromat without flinching, as though there was nothing about her life that needed smoothing over before it could be presented at his mother's table. It was Julian who found Kieran alone by the window afterward, Wren close enough to catch the edge of it. "People are already asking questions," Julian said low. "The renewal isn't settled yet. You bringing home someone from a laundromat, it gets talked about. You know how careful the old families are about attachments outside the line. It always has been that way." "She has a name," Kieran said. "That's not the point, and you know it." Wren did not hear the rest. She did not need to. She understood, standing there in her consignment dress, with her hands folded in front of her, that her presence had already cost Kieran something in that house, something with weight attached to it, somewhere in the family's old, careful arithmetic. And she had no way yet of knowing whether he would hold that line when it mattered more than a seating chart. On the drive back down from the bluff, Kieran asked if she still wanted him at Delphine's dinner. "Yes," Wren said, watching the harbor lights slide past the window. But the word came out smaller than she meant it to, because for the first time since the jar of sea glass had landed on her counter, she was not sure whether they were protecting each other anymore, or simply borrowing each other's nerve to survive rooms that had never been built for either of them. That week, sitting across from Samuel at the kitchen table while he worked through a crossword he pretended to need no help with, Wren asked, as carefully as she could manage, whether he had ever heard old stories about the Ashgrave family, the kind that got passed around town over coffee rather than printed in any paper. Samuel set his pencil down and gave her a long look, the kind he used to give her as a girl when she asked a question that meant she already half knew the answer and only wanted company for the rest of it. "Everybody in Hollow Bay's heard some version," he said. "My own grandmother used to say the harbor never used to hold fish the way it does now, back before the Ashgraves settled the bluff. Said the family struck some kind of bargain with the water itself. Generations back, something about the tide never turning against the town, so long as the old line kept its word and stayed close to the coast. Nobody talks about it straight out. It's the kind of story that gets told sideways, at funerals, or when somebody's had one drink too many at the fish house. But you grow up here, you notice things. Nobody from that family's ever been seen much before sundown. Nobody remembers old Ashgraves getting old. My grandmother swore the current Lady Ashgrave was the same woman she'd seen in a photograph from before the war, not a relative who looked like her. The same woman. That doesn't bother you, Wren asked, sitting here telling me this like it's a ghost story about the ice cream shop closing early. Samuel shrugged, one shoulder, the way he did when a thing had stopped frightening him a long time ago. Man my age has buried enough people to know the ordinary kind of ending isn't the only kind worth being careful about. If that family's kept this harbor fed and this town standing for as long as folks say and kept mostly to themselves doing it, I don't know that it's my business to go digging at the roots of it. He picked his pencil back up. Course. If you're asking because of that fella with the white hair who fixed my porch railing without me noticing until it was already done, that's a different conversation. And I'd want to have it with more than a crossword between us. I'm not asking for that reason, Wren said, which was not entirely true. And Samuel's small, knowing smile told her he understood exactly how not entirely true it was. She thought about it that night on her own porch step, the sea glass turning over and over between her fingers, the harbor dark and quiet beyond the yard. She thought about the frost that had never quite made sense on the wine glasses at the Cormorant account's Christmas order the year before. The way the delivery van's tire had gone flat on a stretch of road Kieran always seemed to know before anyone told him. The way his workshop stayed dim even at noon, and how he was always gone before the earliest light came up over the water. She did not have a name for any of it yet, not one she was ready to say out loud even to herself, standing alone on a dark porch with nobody there to hear her be wrong about it. But she filed it away the way she filed away everything that mattered, quietly, without deciding what to do with it until the moment finally asked her to. Delphine and Grant's house always looked like a magazine had exhaled onto it. White trim, a wreath that wasn't for any holiday, framed photographs from 3 different vacations arranged along the entry hall, like proof of something. Wren had been coming to this house her whole adult life and had never once stopped noticing the piano in the front room that nobody played. "You okay?" Kieran asked at the base of the driveway. "I've survived worse," Wren said, which was not exactly an answer, and reached into her coat pocket for the sea glass out of habit before she caught herself doing it and let her hand fall. Delphine opened the door already mid-law at something someone else had said, and her face did a small, quick recalibration when she saw Kieran standing behind Wren. "Well," she said, "you didn't mention you were bringing anyone." Her eyes moved over him fast, cataloging the coat, the pale hands, the white hair, whatever conclusions people reached about a man like that in under 3 seconds. "This is Kieran," Wren said. "Kieran, my sister Delphine, her husband Grant." Grant shook Kieran's hand with too much enthusiasm, the kind that came from not knowing what else to do with it, and asked about boats, the harbor, anything. Delphine's smile stayed fixed, appraising, a beat longer than it needed to. Samuel arrived not long after, moving slow and careful because of his knee, in the good jacket he wore maybe twice a year. Wren watched Delphine cross the room to fuss over a centerpiece that had shifted an inch, and not cross the room to ask their father how the drive had been. It was such a small thing. It was also not a new thing. "You want to sit, Dad?" Wren asked, and got him settled near the window before anyone offered. For a while it was almost fine. Kieran was quiet, polite, unremarkable in the way she suspected he had worked hard to be tonight, on purpose, for her sake. Someone put on music. A neighbor cornered Samuel about his knee, and Samuel, to his credit, made a joke of it instead of complaining. Then one of Delphine's friends, a woman from the Harbor Association, said Kieran's last name out loud with a little too much interest. Ashgrave, like the hotel. There was something in the paper about the family trust renewal. Delphine's head turned. Wren watched her sister do the math in real time. The pale skin, the white hair, the laundromat, the hotel account, and watched something settle behind Delphine's eyes that was not confusion. It was closer to recognition of an opportunity. "Huh," Delphine said, loud enough to carry, light enough to seem harmless. "I almost left the guest line blank on your invitation. You usually like to keep things so simple." A few people laughed, the way people laugh at things that aren't quite jokes. Wren felt her thumb move toward her pocket again and stopped it. Delphine was not finished. She turned toward Kieran with the same bright, terrible smile and said she hoped he understood what he was taking on. Wren worked nights, after all, and their father needed a great deal of looking after, and it wasn't exactly the life a man like him was used to. "I just don't want anyone getting in over their head," she said, to the room more than to either of them. The room went quiet in that particular way, Rooms go quiet when everyone senses something happening, and nobody wants to be the one who names it. She shouldn't need a rich man's pity to feel important at her own family's dinner, Delphine added. And there it was, out loud, in front of Grant's coworkers and the Harbor Association woman, and their father sitting by the window with his hands folded in his lap. And that was the moment the frost found the wine glasses, and the red found Kieran's eyes, and the room went cold in a way none of them would ever be able to properly explain to anyone who had not been standing in it. He did not raise his voice. If anyone in this room needs reminding what Wren is worth, he said, that says a great deal more about them than it does about her. Then he stepped back and let the room's attention return to where it belonged. Wren looked at her sister. She thought about years of this, the flowers fussed over, the father overlooked, the quiet contest Delphine had been running, since they were girls that Wren had never agreed to enter. Working nights isn't a failure, Wren said, calm, not loud. Taking care of Dad isn't a failure. Watching every dollar isn't a failure. She glanced once around the room, at the framed vacation photographs, at the piano nobody played. The failure is making someone feel small at a dinner that's supposed to be about family. I didn't come here needing your permission to matter, Delphine. I came because I wanted to. Nobody clapped. Nobody should have. Grant looked at his shoes. The Harbor Association woman found something urgent in her wine glass. Wren crossed to Samuel, helped him up from his chair with a hand under his elbow, and said it was time to go. She did not look at Kieran to see whether he would follow. For the first time since the jar of sea glass had landed on her counter, she did not need to know the answer before she walked out the door. Wren drove Samuel home herself, both hands steady on the wheel, the radio off. He did not say much until they were nearly at the house, and then only, "You didn't have to defend me in there. I wasn't just defending you, I know." He looked out the window at the dark shapes of the harbor going by. "I'm proud of you. What you said back there." "Thanks, Dad. Doesn't fix 30 years of your sister acting like you're a project she's managing, though." He said it plainly, no bitterness in it, just fact. "That kind of thing doesn't go away, because you finally said it out loud once." "I know that too," she said. They sat a while without talking once they were inside. Samuel working through a glass of water slower than he needed to. Wren going through the mail without really reading it. Neither of them brought up the heating oil bill sitting near the bottom of the stack, the envelope marked in red. Both of them saw it. Wren slid it under a coupon flyer instead of opening it. Too tired for one more thing that night. She did not answer when Kieran called. She let it go to voicemail, listened to it twice before bed, an apology, careful and sincere, for not warning her he might say something at the dinner, for letting the moment become as large as it became. It was a good apology, as apologies went. It still did not quite reach the thing underneath, which was not really about what he had said in front of Delphine's friends. It was about how her whole private life had ended up on display in a stranger's house at all, twice now, in 2 different rooms that had never once been built with her in mind. 3 days later, the letter from the fuel company arrived. Wren opened it standing at the counter, expecting a past due notice, and found, instead, an account marked paid in full through the end of the season. A receipt had been folded inside, clipped to the invoice number, but not to her name. Her stomach dropped before her mind caught up to why. She called the number on the letter. The woman on the phone was cheerful and professionally unhelpful, the way customer service representatives can be when the screen in front of them says less than the person calling needs to know. "It looks like the balance was settled directly, ma'am. I don't have details on who, just that it's cleared." Wren knew who. She drove to the workshop with the letter still in her hand, the paper creased where she had been gripping it too hard. Kieran was at the far bench sanding a hull that did not need any more sanding, and he looked up at her face and set the block down slowly, as though he already knew. "You paid my father's oil bill. It wasn't a question. I didn't want you carrying that on top of everything else," he said, steady, like a plan that had made complete sense 2 days ago. "I knew the man who runs the company from a marina job years back. I gave him the invoice number. He let me settle it without asking too many questions." One phone call. Wren's voice did not rise, but it went sharp at the edges. "Kieran, the woman on the phone thought I was behind on payments I didn't even know were late. You went into my family's finances without asking me. I was trying to help. I know you were. That was almost the worst part. But you didn't ask. You just decided on your own that this was a weight I needed lifted, and you lifted it. And now I'm standing in your workshop finding out about my own bills secondhand." She folded the letter once, hard. "I've spent years making sure nobody could say I couldn't manage my own family. You undid that with one phone call, and you didn't even think to check with me first. I can undo it. Let me set it up so you pay me back on whatever schedule you want. That's not the point, she said, slower this time, as though she needed him to actually hear it. The money isn't the problem. You're not trusting me enough to ask, that's the problem. Kieran was quiet a long moment, something in his pale face shifting, the realization landing slow and heavy in a way that looked almost physical on him. I didn't think of it that way. I know you didn't. That's exactly what worries me. Wren looked around the workshop at the careful, patient work everywhere. Wood he had spent weeks getting right, the same 6 inches sanded over and over until it was ready. He clearly knew how to be patient with a hull. He had not been patient with her. I need some distance, she said, not forever. Just enough to know I'm not somebody's project. Kieran did not argue the point, though it visibly cost him to let it stand. Okay, he said, whatever you need. She left the workshop without the sea glass in her hand this time, having left it in the truck, and drove home in silence. That night, she put both pieces, the old one and the new one, into the kitchen drawer beside the bills she was determined to open and handle herself, one at a time, in her own name. Kieran sat alone in the workshop long after she had gone, the block of sandpaper still in his hand, running it over wood that had already been smooth for an hour. He understood finally, without anyone telling him, that the real repair was not going to be a phone call or a check or anything dramatic at all. It was going to be doing nothing for a while and letting that be enough. He had lived a very long time, long enough to watch entire families rise and fade along this harbor, long enough to grow careless about the difference between protecting someone and simply deciding things for them, because he had the power to do it quietly and quickly, and without anyone ever having to ask. It was, he thought, an old habit for a man his age, far older than anyone in Hollow Bay understood, and older than he had ever once explained to Wren, not out of secrecy exactly, but because there had never yet been a room quiet enough, or safe enough, to say it in. Summer thinned out slowly along the harbor the way it always did. Fewer boats on the moorings, fog holding longer into the mornings. The tourist crowd at Dot's counter gave way to regulars again. Wren noticed the season changing mostly through her father's jacket, which came off its hook by the door more often now that the mornings had teeth in them. Kieran did not call. He did not send anything else. No jars, no gestures, nothing arriving unannounced at the laundromat counter. The one time their paths crossed at the hardware store on Main Street, he nodded from across the aisle and let her be the one to decide whether to say hello. She did not that day. He did not seem to hold it against her. What he did instead, she heard about secondhand, the way small towns pass things along. He had started teaching a free woodworking class 2 evenings a week at the community center, something he had apparently never done in all the years anyone in Hollow Bay could remember him living there. Wren's coworker mentioned it first, eyebrows up, as though she expected Wren to have an opinion ready. Since when does Kieran Ashgrave teach a class? I have no idea, Wren said, and meant it. She heard more of it from Samuel, who had started going himself on Tuesday evenings, mostly for something to do with his hands that his knee could not complain about. Fella doesn't say much, Samuel reported one night over dinner. Doesn't lecture anybody. Just shows people how to hold a chisel so they don't take a finger off. He said it approvingly. The way he approved of anyone who did a job right without making noise about it. Comes in right after the sun's down, every single time, never a minute before. Punctual as a church bell. At his mother's house, Kieran took a fair amount of grief for it. Lady Seraphine called it a phase, said he ought to be helping Julian with the trust renewal instead of teaching strangers to build birdhouses. Julian was more direct, told him over the phone that he was wasting himself on people who would forget his name by winter. Kieran did not argue either point. He simply kept showing up on Tuesdays. Wren, for her part, had signed up for something of her own that same season, an evening program at the community center that trained people for housing support work, helping families navigate leases and assistance forms. She sat in the back row the first night, feeling every one of her years next to the 20-somethings around her, certain she had made a mistake. It got better. 3 weeks in, she found herself leaning over a classmate's shoulder, walking a younger woman through a tenant assistance form line by line, the numbers making sense to her in a way they never quite had when she was the one filling them out for herself. The instructor caught her doing it and told her flatly that she had a knack for this. Wren did not know what to do with that kind of compliment, so she said thank you and went back to her own worksheet. A woman Wren did not recognize came into the lantern wash one Wednesday near closing, dressed too well for the hour, and did not bring any laundry with her at all. She introduced herself only as a friend of the Ashgrave family, Someone who sat, she said, on the board that had looked after the old harbor trust for longer than the town of Hollow Bay had kept written records. She was polite in the particular way that made politeness feel like a warning. "We like to understand who spends time close to the family," the woman said, browsing the folded stacks as though she might actually buy something. "It isn't personal. It's simply that the arrangement the Ashgraves keep with this harbor is very old and very easily disturbed, and disturbances tend to come from attachments nobody vetted first." "I'm not an arrangement," Wren said, folding a towel with more force than the towel required. "I'm a person he's chosen to spend time with. If your board has questions about that, I'd suggest asking him." The woman smiled, unbothered, and said was, in fact, exactly the sort of answer that tended to worry a board like hers. Then she wished Wren a pleasant evening and left without ever once explaining what precisely she had come to determine, or whether Wren had passed or failed whatever quiet test the visit had actually been. Wren did not mention it to Kieran. She told herself it was because they were keeping their distance, and it was not her place to hand him one more thing to carry on her behalf. But some nights, lying awake, she suspected it was closer to the opposite, that some private, stubborn part of her wanted to prove, to herself if to no one else, that she could stand in a room built to make her feel unqualified and hold her ground there without anyone coming to stand beside her. She thought of her own words from months before, about not needing to walk into rooms alone anymore, and understood that the two things could both be true. She could want company in a hard room and still not need it to know she belonged there. At the community center, Kieran's Tuesday class kept growing, word passing the way it did in a small town, one porch railing and one repaired dinghy at a time. The 19-year-old, whose name turned out to be Cole, had dropped out of the trade school 2 towns over the year before and had not held a steady job since. By the second month, he was arriving early to set up the benches without being asked, and by the third, Kieran had quietly arranged for him to apprentice 2 afternoons a week at the workshop, unpaid at first, then not. Samuel liked to report on this the way other men reported on football scores. That Ashgrave fella's turning the Whitfield boy around, he told Wren one night. Didn't lecture him, didn't hand him money. Just kept showing up and expecting him to show up too. Funny thing to watch happen to a person. It did not surprise Wren hearing it. It matched exactly what she already knew of him. The patience that outlasted whatever it was sanding. The 6 inches of wood gone over and over, until it stopped splitting somewhere nobody could see. She thought more than once that autumn that a man capable of that kind of steadiness with a stranger's ruined hull was not a man who would have made the phone call about the oil bill out of carelessness. He had made it out of habit, an old, ingrained certainty that his help did not require anyone's permission, because for longer than she could imagine, it never had. That did not excuse it, but it helped her understand it was not the whole of him, only the oldest and least examined corner of him, and old corners, she had learned from her own father, could still be swept out if a person was patient enough to keep at it. Delphine texted twice that fall. The first was an apology, 3 sentences long, that read like something drafted more for Delphine's own conscience than for Wren's benefit. Wren read it once and did not answer. The second time, weeks later, Delphine mentioned, almost in passing, no announcement attached, that she had taken Samuel to his cardiology appointment that week because Wren had a shift she could not move. She did not post about it anywhere. She did not bring it up again. It was such a small thing that Wren almost missed it, and then could not stop noticing that it was the first in years Delphine had done something for their father without needing anyone to see her doing it. One night, hunting through the kitchen drawer for a utility bill she had set aside to open herself, Wren found the 2 pieces of sea glass sitting where she had left them weeks before. She turned them over in her palm under the kitchen light. She had put them away angry. She remembered, or not angry exactly, just tired of being managed. Holding them now, she felt something steadier. She could take a kindness from somebody and still tell them no. Those 2 things were not opposites. Whatever she had believed in the moment she had shoved the drawer shut, she saw now that it had not been the whole truth. She saw Kieran once more before the season turned, through the community center's side doorway, laughing with one of his students over a board he had apparently measured wrong twice in a row. He looked easy in a way she had not seen at his mother's table, or in his own workshop with an apology in his mouth. She stood there a second, half in the doorway herself, and then went on to her own classroom instead of crossing over. It was not coldness. It was simply not yet. The flyer came home with Samuel the following week, tacked loosely to his jacket pocket where he had apparently forgotten about it. A harbor fundraiser held at the old boathouse near the water, tables set up for local programs. Wren's class was listed as a presenter, 2 lines down, under community partners. So was Kieran's woodworking class, printed in the same plain type as everyone else's. No mention anywhere of the Ashgrave name, as though he had asked them specifically to leave it off. Wren stood in the kitchen holding the flyer a long moment, Samuel asking from the next room whether she wanted tea, and she did not answer right away. Not because she did not know the answer, because she was still deciding what kind of room she wanted to walk into this time, and who she wanted to be when she got there. The boathouse smelled of brine and old rope, folding chairs set up in uneven rows, tables lined along one wall with hand-lettered signs instead of anything printed. Wren arrived early with a box of intake packets under one arm, alone, because Samuel had insisted he could come later without being managed like a porch plant. She had argued for 3 minutes in the kitchen, lost on the 4th, and left him with his good jacket folded over the back of a chair. She had not planned on being nervous. She had done the reading twice at home, said it out loud to the kitchen while Samuel pretended not to listen from his chair. But standing at her table with a small crowd gathering, social workers, a few contractors, a couple from 2 streets over who had nearly lost their rental the winter before, her voice shook on the first sentence. "My name is Wren Calloway," she said. "I work nights at the Lantern Wash, and this year I started training to help families navigate leases and assistance paperwork, because I got tired of watching people get treated like a problem, instead of a person going through something hard." She did not smooth the shake out of her voice. She just kept going. Nobody in this room needs charity. What people need is somebody who won't make them feel small for needing help. Samuel arrived 10 minutes after the talk ended, with Delphine beside him, his spare jacket folded over her arm. His knee had acted up halfway across the parking lot, and Delphine had apparently made the executive decision to ignore every protest he gave her. "I was not rescued," Samuel told Wren before she could say anything. "He was escorted," Delphine said. "He was limping. I was limping independently." Wren introduced him to 2 of her classmates afterward, watched him shake their hands and ask real questions instead of making small talk, and felt something settle in her chest that had nothing to do with Kieran at all. He was there, she knew, off near the far wall by a table, with a hand-painted sign that read Ashgrave Woodshop, Community Class. He did not come to the front. 2 of his students did the talking, a retired schoolteacher and a young man who could not have been older than 19. Both of them describing what the Tuesday class had meant to them with more enthusiasm than Kieran would ever have mustered for himself. He stood back with his hands in his pockets, letting it be theirs, the low evening light through the boathouse windows, the only kind of light he ever seemed entirely comfortable standing in. They found each other eventually near a table stacked with name tags nobody had bothered to organize. Kieran's tag was crooked, stuck on sideways just above his collar. "You've restored a 40-year-old sailboat hull," Wren said, "and you can't beat a piece of adhesive paper. Some fights you just lose." He straightened it, made it worse, gave up. They stood there a moment in the noise of the room, and then Kieran said what he had apparently been working up to since she walked in. "I've thought about what I did with the oil bill." He did not dress it up. "I took a decision away from you because watching you carry that weight made me uncomfortable, and it was easier to make one phone call than to sit there not being able to fix it. That's the truth of it. I'm not asking you to say it's fine. I just wanted you to hear me actually name it." "I hear you," Wren said. The hurt had not disappeared. She did not pretend it had. But something in the way he had said it, plain, no performance in it, made room for something else to sit beside the hurt instead of crowding it out. "There's something else," Kieran said. And for the first time since the laundromat, she watched him look genuinely uncertain of himself, the pale, careful stillness cracking at the edges. "You've noticed things, the cold, the hours, my mother's house, the way none of us ever seem to eat what's put in front of us. You're too observant not to have noticed." "I've noticed," Wren said carefully. "I'm not going to explain all of it standing in a boathouse with punch on the table," he said, and something almost like humor moved across his face. "But I'll tell you the truth of it, if you want it. My family is old, older than the harbor records say the town is. There's a reason my mother's house runs cold, and a reason I've never once been able to explain convincingly why I only ever seem to be free after dark. Ashgrave isn't just a name in Hollow Bay. It's an old debt the harbor owes and an old line that doesn't behave the way other families do. I am not entirely what I look like standing here in front of you. I wanted you to hear that from me plainly before it became something you had to guess at." Wren looked at him a long moment, at the white hair that had never once, in 3 seasons, shown a trace of gray beneath it, at the hands that stayed cool even holding a warm cup of coffee, at the eyes that had gone the color of garnet in her sister's parlor and frosted the glass on the table without either of them touching it. "Say the true thing then," she said, "all the way." "I'm a vampire king," Kieran said quietly, like a man laying something down he had carried a very long time. "The last of an old line that used to rule this stretch of coast before it was anybody's stretch of coast to rule. I don't age the way you do. I won't for a very long time yet. I've watched towns rise and fall along this harbor more times than I can count without it becoming unkind to try. I did not tell you sooner because I did not know how to say it without it swallowing everything else about me, the workshop, the sea glass, the class on Tuesdays, all of it. I did not want to be only that to you." "You're not only that," Wren said, and was surprised to find how steady her own voice came out. "You're also the man who left a jar of glass on my counter and didn't ask for anything back. You're also the man who apologized properly instead of just being sorry out loud. Being what you are doesn't erase the rest of it. It's just one more true thing to add to the pile." He studied her, as if checking for the flinch he had clearly been braced for the whole time, and did not find it. "I'm not afraid of what you are," she said. "I'm careful about how you use what you have. There's a difference, and it's the same difference it was with the oil bill. It was never really about the money, or the years, or the frost on my sister's wine glasses. It was about whether you'd ask me before you decided things on my behalf. That's still the whole of it, Kieran. Ancient or not." He almost laughed, something rough and grateful moving through it. "That might be the most unromantic thing anyone has ever said to a man in my position." "Get used to it," Wren said. "I don't polish things up before I hand them to you. That was the deal." Later, near the boathouse doors with the crowd thinning, Delphine found Wren near the coffee urn, while Samuel argued with a retired contractor about the proper way to fix a porch step. She did not make a speech out of it. She only said she had been wrong for a long time, and that she knew a text did not undo it. Then she asked what time Samuel's next cardiology appointment was, as though it were the most ordinary question in the world, as though she intended to be there for it. 3 weeks from Thursday, Wren said. 2 o'clock. "I'll take him," Delphine said. It was not a speech. It was not forgiveness handed over whole, either. Wren filed it away as one more small thing to watch, the way she had watched the last one hold. Julian found them by the punch table a little while after that, his watch nowhere in sight for once, his sharp face unreadable in the low boathouse light. He looked at Wren for a long moment, the way a man looks at a column of figures he has been asked to reconsider. "The renewal board met last week," he said, addressing Kieran but watching Wren the whole time. "They asked about you, about whether the line was still, in their words, stable, and," Kieran said, his voice carefully even. "I told them the truth, that you'd never once been steadier," Julian said, and it cost him something to say it. Wren could tell, the same way it had cost Delphine something to offer to drive their father to a cardiology appointment without being asked twice. "I still think you're a fool for teaching splinters into strangers' hands 2 nights a week when there's a hotel that needs running. But I was wrong about the rest of it." He looked at Wren directly then. "You didn't ask for any of what my family is. You've handled it better than most people born into it." "That's not a compliment I expected from you," Wren said. "Don't get used to it," Julian said, almost smiling, and went to go find his coat. Camille caught Kieran alone near the door on her way out, the last of the crowd trickling toward the parking lot, and Wren, gathering intake packets a few tables away, watched the two of them without meaning to. Whatever passed between them was brief. Camille said something Wren could not hear, and Kieran shook his head, not unkindly, and after a moment Camille nodded, the way people nod when a door they had been quietly testing, finally gently, clicks shut for good. She did not look at Wren on her way out. She did not need to. Whatever the renewal board decided about old trusts and older names, Wren understood that particular door had already closed itself weeks ago, somewhere in a hallway at Ashgrave Hall, long before anyone in that boathouse had said a true thing out loud. Near the boathouse doors, with the tide turning somewhere out past the pilings, Wren took both pieces of sea glass from her coat pocket and held one out to Kieran. "It only goes smooth because the tide doesn't quit on it just because it hurts," she said. "It took me a while to figure out I'd been mixing up being needed with being loved and being helped with being managed. They're not the same thing." She closed his cold hand around the glass. "I'm done getting that confused." Kieran turned the piece over once in his palm and did not try to give it back. Months later, with the harbor bare of pleasure boats and her days split between the laundromat and casework with a family fighting eviction, Kieran asked her to dinner. No occasion attached to it, no audience, nothing dressed up as more than it was. Yes, Wren said. Then, because she had learned to say the true thing without waiting to be asked twice, that doesn't mean I'm signing up for your mother's dinners, or your brother's politics, or an old family debt I never agreed to owe. And it doesn't mean I need you to be anything other than what you are. I'd just like to be asked, from now on, before you decide what I can carry. I'd expect nothing less, Kieran said, and meant it in a way that would have surprised the man who had once made a single quiet phone call and thought that was the end of the kindness. She walked into the small restaurant dining room beside him that evening, past a chalkboard menu and a hostess stand with a bowl of peppermint candies, not as proof that an ancient and wealthy man had finally chosen her, but as proof of something steadier, that two people, one of them older than the harbor itself, could stand next to each other in an ordinary room without either of them disappearing to make space for it. The hostess seated them by the window, where the last of the daylight had already given way to the kind of soft, gray dusk Kieran always seemed to breathe easier in, and Wren noticed, the way she noticed most things about him now, without startling at them anymore, that his shoulders had loosened the moment the sun finished its business behind the tree line. Small things, she thought. She had learned him in small things, the way she had learned every machine in the lantern wash, which corner ran hot, which leg needed a wedge of cardboard, which silences meant nothing, and which ones meant everything. You're doing the thing, Kieran said, watching her across the table. What thing? Cataloging me. He said it without any edge in it, almost fond. You've done it since the beginning, filing away which dryer runs hot. Somebody has to keep the records, Wren said. You're not exactly forthcoming. I'm working on that, he said, and reached across the table, not for her hand, but to set the piece of sea glass she had given him at the boathouse down between them, small and green and catching what little light the window offered. I looked it up after. Widow's Point. There's an old harbor record, older than my mother, older than the trust itself, about a piece of coastline that never lets its glass stay sharp for long. Something about the water refusing to hold on to what hurt it. I thought that was a fitting thing for you to have built a habit around, long before you knew anything about me or where I came from. I didn't build the habit around you, Wren said. I built it around surviving my own life. You just happened to be standing nearby when I finally stopped needing to survive it alone. He turned the glass over once between his fingers, unhurried, the same patience he gave a stubborn hull, and did not say anything for a moment, and Wren let him have the silence, because she had learned that was its own kind of true thing between them, the not rushing, the not filling every quiet with more words than a room needed. Delphine still calls me the Ashgrave, she said eventually, half a laugh in it, like it's a title, like I married into a crown. You did marry into a very old, very tired inheritance, Kieran said. I can't promise you it comes with less trouble than the oil bill did. My family doesn't stop being complicated just because a board decided I was steadier. I didn't ask for less trouble, Wren said. I asked to be asked. There's still a difference. There is, he agreed, and for the first time in the whole strange, unlikely arc of the year, she watched him say it like a man who had actually finished learning the lesson, rather than merely repeating it back to pass a test. Outside the window, the harbor lights came up one by one along the water, and somewhere out past the pilings the tide was already turning, patient and unhurried, wearing down whatever sharp edges the day had left behind, the way it always had, the way it would go on doing long after both of them, in their very different measures of time, were gone from this particular table, by this particular window in this small, ordinary town that had never once made the papers for anything except its fish. I think about Wren's kitchen drawer more than I expected to, the one where she put the sea glass away angry, and then, weeks later, took it back out and understood something different by holding the same two pieces. I have a drawer like that myself. Most of us do. Somewhere we put a kindness away because we were too tired or too proud to sort out what it cost us in that moment. It is easy, when you have spent years being the one who manages everything, to mistake being taken care of for being taken over. I have made that mistake more than once in my own life, mixed up a hand reaching toward me with a hand trying to close around me. And it has taken me longer than I would like to admit to learn the difference the way Wren finally did, one bill and one hard conversation at a time. The truth is that most of us are not choosing between being alone and being managed. There is a third option, quieter and harder to find, where somebody helps carry a weight and still asks first. Still leaves your hands on the wheel. That is worth waiting for, even if it takes longer than you would like, even if you spend a few seasons keeping your distance to be sure of it. I think, too, about Delphine, because I have been the sister who fussed over the centerpiece instead of asking how the drive was, and I have also been the sister left holding her breath by the window, waiting to be noticed. Neither one of those women is a villain in this story, not really. People who compare themselves to their siblings for 30 years usually learn the habit from somewhere, and it rarely uncoils all at once. It uncoils the way Delphine's did, in a text nobody asked her to send, in a doctor's appointment she drove to without announcing it first. If somebody in your life has spent years making you feel smaller so they could feel steadier, it is fair to keep your guard up. It is also fair, when the small gestures start arriving quietly, to let yourself notice them instead of waiting for the grand apology that may never come in the shape you pictured. And I think about the age difference nobody in this story ever quite says out loud. The fact that Kieran had already watched centuries of harbors rise and empty out before Wren was ever born, and how none of that mattered nearly as much, in the end, as whether he remembered to ask before he acted. However old we get, however much we think we have learned about protecting the people we love, the people we love still deserve to be asked. That is not a rule that softens with age or money or how many winters you have already survived. If there is one thing I hope you carry out of this harbor and back into your own evening, it is that choose the people who ask. And when you are the one with something to give, whatever it is you are old enough or lucky enough to have plenty of, remember that the kindest thing you can do with it is still always to ask first.